You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Good evening. Wait a minute. Okay. Good evening. My name is Peter Bassman. I'm chairman of the Branford Inland Wetland Commission. I'll now open the commission's regular meeting of February 13th, 2025. It is now 7 o'clock. The evening's meeting will be conducted as a virtual meeting in accordance with Public Act 22-3 using the Zoom platform. The documents for tonight's meeting are in the town hall or on the agency's webpage. Final agenda for tonight's meeting was filed on February 12th. It is also posted on the town's website. Does the staff have any changes for this evening's meeting?
No.
Okay. A couple of housekeeping rules. Provide exposure for the public. Branford Community Television will be recording this evening. Thankful for their participation such that the public can view these meetings. Regarding speaking tonight, please make sure that your face is visible when speaking. For a complete and accurate record of tonight's proceeding, please indicate your name each time you're making a statement. If you wish to comment, please use the raise your hand feature. Once the meeting has begun, if not speaking, please mute your microphone. You now take a roll call. When I say your name, please indicate your presence. Commissioner Gokowski.
Commissioner Gokowski, present. Commissioner
Begeman.
Commissioner Begeman, present.
Commissioner Amrad.
Commissioner Amrad, present.
Commissioner Papantonis.
Commissioner Papantonis, present.
Commissioner Boda.
Commissioner Boda, present.
All right, next up, any commissioner this evening that feels on any part of the agenda that they need to recuse themselves from discussions and voting on that item, please indicate so now.
Commissioner Amrad, I will recuse myself from matters regarding the Beacon Hill Road applications. Let's see, this is so items 2A and 3A on tonight's agenda.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, first up is the approval of the minutes. We have 2 minutes for approval this evening. One is the meetings from January 9th, which were revised based on some comments at our January 23rd meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those revised minutes?
This is Commissioner Begeman. I move that we approve the minutes for the January 9, 2025 regular meeting.
Commissioner Papantonis, second.
Any further discussion on the minutes? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any recusal, absence? Any people that want to decide that they do not want to approve the revised minutes of January 23rd, of January 9th? Okay, meeting approval of minutes are approved. Next up, we have the meeting minutes from January 23rd. I had a question. Commissioner Begeman raised a issue regarding the soil composition and a discrepancy thereof. And I guess I don't know if this is the to bring that up, but it doesn't look like there was a resolution to that. I didn't say anything in an updated exhibit list. Do we deal with that within the conditions since we can't provide any new evidence? What's the right way to handle that?
Sounds more content related to the application rather than minutes. So maybe save that question to when we get to that agenda item.
Great. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes from January 23rd?
It's Commissioner Goklowski. I put a motion forward to approve the minutes as corrected.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Ormrod, I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any abstentions? Okay. I will now reopen deliberations for Inland Wetland 240902. On September 26th and 24th, a regular meeting of the Branford Inland Wetland Commission, the commission voted to open a public hearing on the application as it was determined that the proposal planned a disturbance of the wetlands on the site in excess of 5,000 square feet. The date of 11/14 was established to open that public hearing. CLA Engineers was engaged in October to assist the commission in the review of the application. At the 11/14 meeting, the commission agreed to continue the public hearing until December 12th of 24. Discussion was not concluded at the December meeting, so parties agreed to continue the public hearing to January 9th, 2025. On that date, additional material was discussed and the public hearing was closed. To that point, since the public hearing is now closed, no new evidence can be added to the record already established. The evidence to be evaluated was restricted and included on the last exhibit list. No additional comments, either applicant or public, can be entered at this point. Commissioners that are seated for this application are required to be fair and independent, not predisposed to any outcome. The commission must decide the merit of the application from the facts as they appear on the record, from their own personal observations and technical expertise, and from the expertise of outside consultants hired to assist the commission in assessing the application. Permit decisions must be concluded within the timeframes specified by the Connecticut statutes and our regulations. Since the commissioners that are answer the roll call are sufficient in terms of numbers, they can all be seated and are able to discuss and vote on this evening's matters. Deliberations on Inland Wetland 240902 began January 23rd with the commission reviewing the application's compliance with the inland wetland regulations for the town of Branford, identifying areas of discussion for the purpose of providing recommendations to staff to prepare a document that the commission would review this evening. The deliberations were continued till today's meeting. Just remind us, staff, what the timeframes are as we consider this application.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. At this time, a decision would have to be made this evening, or the commission would have to request a continuance from the applicant.
Okay. As indicated in my remarks, our discussions at the last meeting provided information for staff to offer up a recommendation, which was sent out and is in the hands of all the commissioners. It's a 6-page document, rather lengthy, obviously, given the size of the project and the discussions that ensued from that application. So it's going to take some time to go through those recommendations. I don't believe that any commissioner should feel constrained to the draft recommendation, but it provides a good framework for us to operate this evening as we move forward on this application. Jamie, you want to kind of give us an overview of what your thinking was as you consolidated the commission's thoughts from the last meeting and prepared this document.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I'll just backtrack real quick and address, since the public hearing has been closed, as stated by the chairman, no new information can be added to the record. So anything that was raised as an outstanding point at the last meeting would either have to be addressed through a permit condition or be considered, whether or not that outstanding information is, detrimental to being able to make a decision to grant a permit. I have drafted a document based on discussion at the last meeting. None of it's set in stone. It's all up for, discussion and debate. The other thing that is before the commission is a request to reduce the application fee has been submitted. It was discussed before they submitted this current application when they were withdrawing the previous application that they would likely be pursuing a fee reduction request. That was submitted after the closing of the public hearing, but is before the commission for consideration and should be acted on prior to a decision being made regarding the application itself. So I don't know if the commission wants to start with the draft resolution document or if you want to start by reviewing the fee reduction request.
Commissioner Basserman, I guess I prefer to go through the rather lengthy document to see how we proceed on that basis before we start talking about fee reductions.
Okay.
Because my guess is there's going to be some, fair amount of discussion on the item.
I think that makes sense. I also just wanted to say it out loud to make sure that hopefully we don't forget that it's there. And you can keep it in the back of your head as we go through the document. So when there's direct activity within a wetland that results in wetland filling, oftentimes we'll go through a whole resolution process where the commission essentially makes some findings and then lists out the conditions of approval, assuming that the commission is going to grant a permit. So this document was drafted by and large based on the discussion at the last meeting. I guess I can screen share it and we can walk through it real quick. And I do have the Word document version of this so we can make edits as we go. So starts off with the findings, if you will. Whereas in the matter of the above application, the Town of Branford Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission, the Commission considered all relevant evidence properly submitted to it, including but not limited to the testimony at the public hearing and the materials listed on the attached list of exhibits. And whereas the Commission evaluated the application materials and the foregoing evidence as it relates to the factors and criteria of decision set forth in Connecticut General Statutes 22A41 and Section 10.2 of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Regulations of the Town of Branford. And whereas the Commission finds that the proposal contained in the application is consistent with the purposes set forth in CGS 22A-36, complies with the applicable provisions of the Connecticut General Statutes and the regulations. And whereas the Commission finds that based on a comprehensive review of the proposed plans, wetland impacts, 2-to-1 mitigation of the wetland impacts, the introduction of sanitary sewer access to an area with known septic system failures, the site history, and the wetland functions and values assessment, a feasible and prudent alternative to the proposed regulated activities sufficient to accomplish the objectives of the applicant does not exist. And whereas upon evaluation of the above and with the stipulation of certain conditions as listed below, the Commission finds that based on the record, the impacts of the proposed regulated activities are consistent with the objectives stated in Section 1 of the regulations.
Hey, Jamie, can you scroll that?
Sorry. With the regulations and the factors of criteria specified above. And then it goes into the conditions. Now they're, or be it resolved that the application as stated above be approved subject to the following conditions, limitations, and modifications. And I'm reading my paper copy because I already kind of noticed a couple of things that probably should be tweaked slightly. So we've got standard conditions or standard inspections, which I've kind of tweaked specifically for this application. Pre-construction meeting for each phase because they had a phased kind of site development plan consisting of 4 general phases. Prior to the land clearing, locations of phase clearing limits to be marked by surveyor. B, sediment and erosion control inspection for each phase prior to land disturbance. Locations of sediment and erosion controls to be marked by surveyor. C, pre-implementation mitigation meeting to include at minimum IW agent, wetland scientist, site contractor, and landscaper. D, post-mitigation planting inspection to include at minimum wetland scientist, and if planting/seeding will be completed in phases, an inspection shall be scheduled for each phase. And E, final inspection after all site work is completed and site is stable. There are some further conditions that go into some more detail, particularly in regards to the pre-implementation mitigation meeting. But before I keep going, are there any questions so far from commissioners?
This is Commissioner Begemon. Quick question, I hope. The site contractor, is that a site supervisor?
Yeah, that would be, so I picked site contractor because that was the language that George Logan used in his wetland report or in his mitigation report. So the intent would be that would be kind of the foreman, if you will, the person overseeing and responsible for making sure that the work gets done properly on site.
Okay, thank you.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, is the post-mitigation phase timeframe different than the phase timeframe for the sediment and erosion controls?
Yes.
I would think, as a follow-up, I would think that the post-mitigation planting phases could be somewhat more extended than those in item B. And I'm just wondering, in that extended time frame, is that inspection to be done only at the completion, or did you want interim reports as well?
I think that's going to be answered through some of the additional conditions. So I'd say keep that question on the back burner and see if it gets addressed. Because there's a condition regarding the 5 years of monitoring for the mitigation areas. And there's also a condition that addresses inspections of the mitigation area while it's being constructed.
Jamie, this is Commissioner Boda. Can we just put an asterisk next to site contractor and then give a little definition at the bottom that says just what you've implied, which is site contractor is meant to mean the person responsible for the oversight of the work, the on-site work, however you want to word it. But
what if we just put that in parentheses?
Yeah, so some way of denoting our intention of what that is. Because it could be like a site supervisor, like
Okay, person responsible for oversight of site work?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the intent is, so that would be like the excavation side of things, and the landscaper would be on the planting side of things. Okay. And this is the same document, so I guess we can just scroll through here. Any other questions so far on condition 1?
No. And then this is Commissioner Boda again, if you could zoom in so that you just have one page showing. Thank you. Now we can see it better.
You don't want to squint all night?
No, thank you.
All right. Condition number 2. Prior to start of site work, the following changes shall be made to the plans and submitted for review and approval. The clearing limit for phase 1 Sheet 8, Exhibit 54, shall be revised to follow the double row of silt fence on the southern side of the proposed disturbance, approximately where the silt fence should say intersects instead of bisects the existing 76-foot contour rather than the existing tree/brush line to ensure that activity within the wetland to ensure there is no activity within the wetland until mitigation work is ready to commence or ground disturbance beyond the sediment and erosion control measures. So I'm going to just change bisect to intersects. And then B, I missed labels. So it should be the labels for the proposed contours 86 through 90 for phase 2, sheet 9, exhibit 54 within the northern wetland impact area shall be relocated onto the proposed contour line to tie in with existing grades and align with the phase 3 contours on sheet 10 to prevent potential confusion during site implementation. C, wetland mitigation plans, notes, plant lists, and details prepared by REMA shall be incorporated in the final plans and shall include the 12 button bush plantings proposed in Exhibit 62. D, stockpile locations for wetland soils shall be shown on the site plans as indicated in Giuliano Associates' response to CLA engineers' comments. Number 4, Exhibit 61, and shall include notes addressing REMA's comments. Number 2, Exhibit 62, in regards to the management of invasive species material and restrictions for material use on site. And number 10, Exhibit 33B, identification that the stockpile areas shall be at least 50 feet away from the wetlands. E, site plan shall specify the appropriate screen size for the CDS hydrodynamic separator to achieve 90% or greater total suspended solids removal as represented in Exhibit 35 rather than the 80% represented in Exhibit 3E.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, are any of these, and maybe not only these that we looked at, but going forward, new news to the applicant?
I think all of these things were in some regard discussed on the record of the public hearing.
Okay.
Well, maybe moving the labels for contours 86 through 90, but I'd say that's
Yeah, minor. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Begeman. The at least 50 feet away from the wetlands, is that a standard?
That was called out in the
For the
referenced exhibit, Exhibit 33B. That was the recommendation of the wetland scientist, which is why I added that.
Okay.
So that was the applicant's information. Anything more on number 2 at this time?
As Commissioner Begeman, just a typo for your intersects, you left out. It looks like it says insects up there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
All right.
Must be that 2020 vision.
Okay, so number 3. Prior to start of site work, the mitigation plan, Exhibits 33A and 33B, shall be updated to A, include the 12 button bush plantings proposed for Exhibit 62, and B, if applicable, clarification regarding percent organic matter and depth of topsoil in reference to Exhibit 62 shall be provided. If no change is applicable, correspondence from the soil scientist explaining such shall be submitted. So that is in regards to the discussion at the last meeting where the conflicts were identified. And I don't think there was quite enough information to tell if things were directly relatable or not, which is why I kind of gave the option B.
Okay.
Prior to start of site work, the conservation deed restriction language is to be reviewed by and meet the approval of the IWEO, which is Inland Wetland Enforcement Officer, and we don't define it, so I think we should spell it out. And town council. The restriction language should address construction of the mitigation areas and stormwater management and associated maintenance of these areas, short and long term. After approval, the language shall be placed on the deed and map to be filed. Copies of both the filed deed and map are to be submitted to the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency prior to the start of site work and/or submitting applications for building permits.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think that four is fine. What I'm wondering is that we also discussed putting a notice on, so this is a homeowners association, correct? Of some sort, whether we want to call it a condo or homeowners association. And so we had discussed putting information on the resale docs, which is not the same as the deed language. So the resale doc gives notice to people purchasing that there is a conservation area, and what we discussed in the 123 meeting to be included in that notice was that there is a requirement for management of the mitigation area, that there will be there's a requirement of BMPs to reduce the use and impacts of fertilizers and pesticides, and that there is an integrated pest management plan to, again, reduce the use of fertilizers and pesticides, synthetics.
So I do have a condition that addresses that. It's condition number 16. I did just jot down conservation restriction on the side though, because I didn't identify that it should identify the fact that there's a conservation restriction, which seems reasonable and appropriate. So we can dive into that more when we get there, or if you want, we can jump there and then come back to 5. I'm sorry?
I see it. Thank you.
Do you want to jump there while your mind's on it, or?
Nope, I've got it. I've got a note for it.
Okay. Number 5, the material for the pickleball court is not specified in the application materials. While it was represented that the stormwater calculations assumed an impervious surface, it is recommended that a pervious surface be considered, if possible, to reduce the impervious surface on site and runoff contributing to the stormwater basin.
This is Commissioner Begman. When I was thinking about that, I was thinking about the pickleball court and that parking that's all in that area. I don't know if that was specifically said, if we said that in the hearing, or I know we talked about the surface of the pickleball court.
Just as a quick note, I believe Commissioner Myasin has joined the meeting. I don't believe Myasin wasn't present at all the public hearing, and she wasn't present at the deliberations at the last meeting. So she will not take part in deliberations on this application, but can join in on the other items on the agenda. We could tweak it. If the commission wanted to do that, I think it would have to, we'd have to add an extra sentence in here, because that was, I recall, just because the first sentence is specifying that the material isn't specified for the pickleball court, whereas the parking area is specified to be paved.
Yeah, and this Commissioner Bassman, wouldn't that change some of the calculations?
Yeah. I guess you could add a sentence to the end that any other areas which could be swapped for an impervious surface.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. My recollection was that the calculations included impervious surface for the pickleball court.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. While it was represented that the stormwater calculations assumed an impervious surface, it is so at the last deliberation meeting, it was kind of discussed how the material for the pickleball court wasn't known. And when asked, the project representative from Giuliano Associates didn't know what the surface would be and whether it would be impervious or not, but that his calculations were done assuming that it was impervious. But I think the thought process was that if it's possible to have it be pervious, that would be preferred.
This is Commissioner Bassman, but the pickleball court is, much smaller than a consideration for, all of the paved surfaces.
Right. Yeah. It's a pretty small area, but I think that, the thought was that if it's reasonable and feasible, that it should be considered as an option.
Yeah, I'm okay with the pickleball. I guess the question was, does it get extended beyond
very
that?
open-ended beyond that.
This is Commissioner Goklowski. I don't remember the size that they were proposing of the
The
pickleball.
pickleball court. I don't know the typical size of a pickleball court, but according to the site plans, and honestly, I'm not sure if the pickleball court goes all the way to the fence or if it's probably the smaller area. Looking at the 94-foot contour, this is 1 inch equals 40.
So it looks relatively small.
It's smaller than a tennis court.
Yeah. Approximately 900 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
This is Commissioner Begman. My thinking was just that why wouldn't we want an effort to be made to have pervious surfaces where possible? And we had talked about, they don't have to have a pickleball court. It could have been some other type of recreational area that wasn't paved. So if they're doing a pickleball court, at least we can have it as, a pervious surface, and then, yeah. Why not add the parking spaces near it, That was my thing.
If you have language to suggest, I'd be happy to type it in, but
This is Commissioner Basserman. Commissioner Begman, was that a clarification that the only thing that you were raising was the parking area associated with the pickleball court?
I think
Yes, Commissioner Begman, yes. Just that whole area,
the guest parking area.
yeah.
Yeah. That to me seems reasonable. We don't have to spend a lot of time adding worrying about the words here. Why can't we say an associated parking area? And
I just think okay, so while it is represented that the stormwater calculation assumed an impervious surface, it is recommended that that a pervious surface be considered if, I guess I just don't know where I would insert it.
What about the first sentence? The material for the pickleball court and associated parking.
Well, it is specified for the associated parking.
This is Commissioner Goklowski. I don't know why they need additional parking for the pickleball court when all the residents are in one. They're they're on the same property. I mean, they can walk to the pickleball court.
I don't think it's for the pickleball court. I think it's to meet the planning and zoning parking requirements. But I don't know if that's true or not. But I think to try and assume why they had that parking and whether it's cuttable at this point, that would have been something that should have come up during the public hearing.
This is Commissioner Basserman. And it may be that residents and non-residents can use the pickleball court if a resident is a player. So you probably need some parking there. Spend a lot of time on a pickleball court. I know that.
We could just say if nearby parking area could be made it, or I don't know. I feel like that gets.
That was never brought up in the discussions on during the public hearing.
Well, Commissioner Begemon did raise the question as to the pickleball court during the public hearing and what that surface was, and that's when Giuliano Associates representative indicated that they didn't know what the surface was. I don't recall. I know that the last meeting we discussed the associated parking area a bit.
Okay.
I don't know if that was discussed on the public hearing record or not. And I thought that we had landed on just the pickleball court, which is why I worded it the way I did. But
quick question, Inland Wetland Associate Katie Blanchett. I just quickly Googled.
Oh no, Katie.
Oh, sorry.
Don't do that.
Oh, okay. Disregard.
So this is Commissioner Boda. I think, in this moment, it's like we're doing the whatchamacallit, the requirements for them. This is not necessarily a requirement, but a recommendation. And so you could say, please be ready to type, Jamie, because I'm only going to be able to do this once. You can say, while it was represented that the stormwater calculation, no, you're okay. I'm starting from the middle. While it was represented that stormwater calculation is assumed impervious surface. Wait, no, you could get rid of that while. It was represented that the stormwater calculation assumed an impervious surface for the pickleball court, period. Or actually not period, and impervious, no. Assumed impervious for the pickleball court and the associated parking. And associated parking.
Yeah,
Hold on, let me get the thought out and then you can fix it. The goal is to increase infiltration, and therefore, where possible, it's recommended that pervious surface be considered. And then the rest as it is.
Okay. So it was represented that the stormwater calculations assumed an impervious surface for the pickleball court and the associated parking. To increase impervious infiltrations.
Yeah,
increase infiltration.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, so associated parking, period.
Right.
Associated parking, period.
That makes sense. To increase infiltrations. I'm not undo that.
Whoa.
Okay.
Okay, how's that?
I think that
captures it.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Number 6. Prior to start of site work, a bond shall be submitted to ensure the proper installation and maintenance of all project erosion and sedimentation controls for the site development, as well as the project mitigation areas, and subsequent monitoring to ensure mitigation success standards have been met. The permit holders to submit to the IW duly authorized agent an itemized estimate, including quantities and unit pricing for the cost to bond the items listed below for the agent's review and approval. After approval by the IW agent, the bond is to be submitted consistent with Section 13 of the regulations prior to start of work. A, all items to be
Wait,
bonded.
hold on, Jamie, this is Commissioner Boda. So am I understanding this correct, that this number 6 has the sediment and erosion control bond and the planting bond for the mitigation all as one?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah.
I hadn't totally wrapped my brain around that. Okay, go ahead.
So items to be bonded shall
Is Commissioner
include.
Bassman, as a follow-up to Commissioner Boda's question, is that the way we normally deal on a large project in terms of combining those bonds, given, the different timeframes associated with them?
So it's one permit condition, and so I don't think it holds the applicant beholden to submitting one bond, and I don't think it holds the applicant and or the commission beholden to releasing all of the bond at the same time. So
Okay.
we have, oftentimes whether the bonds are in the same condition or not, because we've kind of been doing it both ways.
Okay.
It'll either get submitted as one bond because it's all in one person's name, or if they're splitting it surety and cash, as long as we get the total bond amount, it doesn't really matter how we get there, as long as it's the appropriate bond amount for the appropriate bond item. And we did, back in a couple years ago, the commission did change their regulations. 710. And I don't think that it really changed that much, but I just want to show that the way that I've structured it, I tried to structure it to kind of align a bit more with the regulations. So section 710 is if compensation is proposed or required for section 7.9 of these regulations, because there's loss of wetlands and mitigation to offset such, that the agency may require a management plan. However, not all of the items below are required. And then we've got what it should address, yada, yada, yada. And then D is a bond in accordance with section 13 shall be posted. And you'll see here all sediment erosion controls, all planting material, all monitoring.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
This is Commissioner Boda. I just want to add 2 items. So I guess item 8 and 9, which again was discussed at the 123 hearing meeting. And one of them was soil amendments. And I don't know, or unless you wanted to add that to
5.
4, soil medium. Yeah. And then excavation machinery, does that fit under?
Site work required to implement the mitigation areas to include, and if you want, we could bullet these too if it would make it easier. Excavation, import, export of soil medium, and organic matter. So organic matter was kind of, I think, my organic matter / soil amendments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can just add.
Soil amendments is more general. Organic matter, I kind of want to remind them, is essential.
Uh-huh.
Why did that? Oh, because I have this here. So we'll see if we need that, but. Oh boy. Okay. What was the other thing? Soil amendments.
It was the excavation machinery. Just had a note from that meeting.
I think excavation would encompass that.
Would it?
I mean, you need to have the machinery in order to conduct the excavation.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, uh,
This is Commissioner Gokowski. Based on the site, I don't think they can get very large equipment into that property without having a major problem. So I don't have a problem with the use. I'm sure they know what equipment they can get on the property.
We're not talking about that. We're talking though about the bond, which they are going to have to calculate. And so we're not like on the site getting stuff in and out. We're talking about coming up with a dollar amount that is going to go into the bond. And so we just need to be really thoughtful about what goes on to that list so that the bond can be calculated correctly. So that in the case that the developer starts work but doesn't complete work, or any number of things happen and we need to use the bond to finish the work, there's enough funding to pay for the mitigation area.
all right. So I've got excavation, equipment to complete work, import,
Yeah.
export of soil medium and organic matter / soil amendments. Or I hate when I list things within lists.
Yeah.
And soil scientist oversight. Is there anything else you had that you wanted to add?
Nope, that was no, that was good. Thank you.
Okay. So we've got, just to kind of quickly list them all, we've got sediment erosion control measures as shown on the proposed site plan. 2 and 3 really fall under 1, but we're specifying all inlet protection and all anti-tracking pads. 4, all plantings and seed mixes for the mitigation areas plus a 10% installation / maintenance contingency. 5, we've already gone over. 6, monitoring reports for mitigation areas over the 5-year monitoring period. 7, invasive species management for 5 years by qualified invasive species management firm / individual for the mitigation areas and the disturbed areas identified as brush to be undisturbed after construction. And I think, yeah, I've got the wrong exhibit there. That should be 54, sheet 12. And as a point of clarity, if we wanted, we could change this to all sediment so that it aligns with 2 and 3.
Mhm.
Any questions, concerns, or feedback?
Item B.
Item B pertains to the release of said portions of bond. A request for partial release of bond funds may be submitted in writing as portions of the bonded work is completed in the following manner. A request for release of the erosion control portion of the bond, items 1 through 3, and A above may be submitted after the site work is completed and site condition is stable. 2, a request for release of site work required to implement the mitigation area portion of the bond, item 5, and A above may be submitted after all associated mitigation work, including all the plantings and seeding, has been completed in compliance with the approved plans. If this request is submitted prior to full site stabilization, 10% of the original amount shall be retained until final site stabilization is achieved in case repair work is required. To document compliance, the following items should be submitted with this request. an as-built survey documenting compliance with the extent and topography of the mitigation areas, certification from the wetland scientist that all mitigation work has been completed and planted/seeded under their supervision and is in compliance with this approval. And then 3, a request for release of the planting, invasive species management, and monitoring portions of the bond, items 4, 6, and 7 in A above, may be submitted after the wetland scientist has submitted documentation that the standards outlined in section 710 of the regulations has been achieved for 5 years or the life of the permit, whichever occurs first.
Okay.
Any questions or concerns? All right. Number 7, installation and maintenance of the mitigation areas will be consistent with section 710 of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses regulations of the town of Branford, which includes A, plantings per the approved plan, exhibits 33A and 33B as modified by exhibit 62, and B, the submission of reports at 6 months, 1 year, and annually thereafter for a period of no less than 5 years that document 85% survival rate of planted vegetation and monitoring and control of invasive species. Any comments, questions? 8, I
Ms.
think.
Commissioner Basserman, can you scroll back up on 7 for
Yep,
a minute?
sorry.
So these are plantings within the mitigation area, yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm okay.
So I think this one might be easier if we take this portion of the sentence out and put it at the end. So if we say a wetland scientist with experience overseeing and implementing similar mitigation installations and monitoring shall oversee all mitigation work, including but not limited to clearing, dewatering, grading, microtopography, planting, marking of invasives, marking of native materials for salvage/retention, and vegetation establishment. Relative experience shall be reasonably satisfactory to the commission and or its duly authorized agent.
Oh, that sounds good. This is Commissioner Boda.
I think otherwise it gets kind of confusing.
Yeah.
A, at the time of the pre-mitigation meeting, the wetland scientist shall provide an anticipated work schedule for the completion of all mitigation-related tasks. B, in accordance with the soil scientist George Logan's recommendations, mitigation work shall occur in July, August, or the winter. C, to help reduce impacts, the soil scientist shall ensure that work pauses if organisms are observed which can move out of the way of work, i.e. frogs, until such organisms have moved out of the way of work. D, the wetland scientist shall provide routine weekly updates via email throughout the mitigation process from point of clearing until all planting/seeding has been completed. If there is a seasonal pause in work, a corresponding pause and updates may be approved by the duly authorized agent after notification by the applicant, so long as the IW office is notified in advance of work resuming. E, while post-completion report requirements are outlined in condition number 7, the applicant is encouraged to have the soil scientist inspect the site routinely while the mitigation area is established to help ensure that the reports are positive in terms of the success standards. F, the wetland scientist must approve any alteration of species or size of plant material, and the wetland scientist is to notify the wetland department of changes in writing. Email is acceptable.
This is Commissioner Begemon. At the last meeting, didn't we make it a point that it should be a wetland scientist who had successful experience with these kinds of projects? Or do we want to put, do we want to put that in there? Because we had talked about that we wanted it to be overseen by somebody who had success with these kind of mitigations.
I think that's where the relative experience shall be reasonably satisfactory to the
Okay.
commission and or its duly authorization comes into play.
Okay, thank you.
This is Commissioner Bassman. There was a follow-up to Commissioner Begeman's comment. Similarly, what about if we don't agree that the individual or firm that's hired is satisfactory?
I mean, the applicant or permit holder would be informed of such, and they'd have to find somebody else. So I think that this condition essentially puts them on notice that if, I mean, there's already been some discussion about, you know, I think.
But we refrained, I guess, on purpose with the word approval.
Well, it says reasonably satisfactory to the commission and or its duly authorized agent, which means it has to be reviewed by the agency or its agent. So I think it certainly gives, you know, the option for the agency to weigh in. And this condition puts the permit holder, assuming that it's issued, on notice that that's something they have to comply with. So they should be notifying us of who they're using, you know, at a point where we could review it and provide comment prior to it, you know, being an issue.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. There's a lot of subjectivity in that, and the enforcement is going to be difficult. I mean, this is the kind of thing that litigation is made out of.
Which is what I'm trying to avoid.
Right. No, it's too loose and hard to interpret. But I don't know how we can put something in this that's going to require them to it's going to be something that we're going to have a very, very hard time enforcing. I don't know how you're going to resolve it. I don't have a recommendation on language. It's just so subjective.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think, as with any of these conditions, many of them are already part of. They're already part of the applicant's plan. We are simply formalizing and clarifying the things that we are paying very close attention to and are critical for success for us. I think with any one of these, we can say, well, they could not do this. And then we see where our enforcement abilities lie or do not lie. Any of them can be tested. And, you know, we've certainly have a fair amount of experience with the legal system. I personally, I'm not super worried about it. It is ambiguous, although I do think that there is quite a deep record of the conversation of what the intent was, and that would go with any kind of complaint that was made about it. And I think that what we're looking for is reasonable. And so I don't think it's something that's out of line to ask for, that we don't have some cheap junior that is fresh out of college handling a mitigation plan of this this size and of this importance. So I don't anticipate that is the applicant's plan. I suspect that they continue to plan on working with the same people, but we are simply codifying the things that we discussed over the past 5,042 years.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I did send this document over for town council to look at and requested specifically that this section be looked at. And And so that has been reviewed by town council.
This is Commissioner Bassman. I guess at least I think prior to the work starting, the experience, the successful experience of the individual or firm that was hired, and I guess the resume probably should get submitted to staff prior to the commencing of work. At a, I guess as a fundamental review by the staff so that they can determine that, yes, this is reasonably satisfactory in terms of the qualification of the individual hired.
What number? So this is Commissioner Boda. Are you saying that at the end of number 8, you should add a line to the effect of experience shall be reasonably satisfactory to the commission and its duly authorized agent, and a current CV for that person shall be submitted prior to the start of work, something like that?
Yeah, that works. I mean, to me as a minimum.
Yeah.
You're going to spell out CV, Jamie?
Yeah, let her get the thought out.
I'm having a brain fart. I might need help.
Curriculum vitae. See.
VIRCULUM, new word, VITAE, I think is how you spell it. I'm sorry, AE. I'm a little rusty on my Latin.
Right out of that I, yeah.
VITAE.
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 Get the T. Yeah, get the T. There you
There.
Commissioner Begman, you wanted to add prior to the start of work to the end of that sentence, I think.
Yes.
Prior to scheduling the pre-mitigation meeting. Does that work?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Is there okay, or should I say the wetland scientists? I think it's probably fine. Anything else on 8?
Mm-hmm.
All right. 9, upon clearing of the site and until the site is stabilized, the applicant shall retain a qualified erosion control professional to inspect the site erosion and sedimentation controls and provide written reports to the Inland Wetlands Agency weekly and after each measurable precipitation event of 1/4 inch or greater, identifying status of erosion controls and repairs needed. The qualified erosion control professional shall be from the engineering firm of record or an approved third party not associated with completing site work. Reports shall be submitted electronically via. Any comments, questions? 10, stockpiles must comply with the details provided within the proposed site plan materials. Stockpiling needs shall be considered as the phasing of the site is implemented to ensure that the amount of disturbance on site does not result in an excess of material stockpiling beyond what the site conditions can handle. Any known excess material should be properly removed from the site in a timely manner to reduce the on-site erosion potential. Questions, comments?
This is Commissioner Bassman. Jamie, can you up to 9 again?
Mhm.
Where in the area that we're in right now, 9 or some other area, if I remember, do we address this? If I remember when we had a large development of a couple of years ago, there was, because of the site clearing, repeated sediment that got disturbed, and the road that had been established had to be cleaned and swept numerous times. Where do we deal with that in these conditions such that it gets done immediately as opposed to, sitting there? Does 9 try to capture that, or is that somewhere else?
I think that, yeah, 9 tries to prevent that from becoming a real issue. I mean, it might be that the road needs to be swept is one of the recommendations, but it would make that recommendation ideally before it became, a substantial issue that could be resulting in, enough material getting into the storm system or what have you, and, potentially being contributed towards wetland areas.
That's what I'm wondering,
and all of that.
if breaches in the soil erosion and sedimentation controls occur, that we put some time frame in there where that has to be, a priority response.
So we could say erosion control repairs shall be made as soon as possible and prior to the next report being submitted.
Yeah, I mean, some measure, again, like we had said before, that clearly the intent is not to have either a complaint come in about that or, staff going out and coming across that before it gets fixed.
This Commissioner Papantonis, can we say instead of possible, can we say practicable?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
You're going to see how bad I am at spelling.
Practicable.
At least that's not Latin.
Shall be made as soon as practical and shall be reflected in the next report. And corrections made shall be reflected in the next report submitted. Does that work?
Thank you.
All right, so we did the stockpiles.
Yeah.
11, all site work shall be performed in accordance with the approved phasing plan, Exhibit 54, sheets 8 through 11. Any deviation from the approved phasing plan will require review and approval by the agency or its duly authorized agent as determined by the agent. I'm not sure if that parentheses section is necessary. The project engineer shall submit, I think a review of is not necessary. I think it should just be shall submit the proposed changes and address whether any modifications to the sediment and erosion control measures and or temporary stormwater conveyance is required to ensure wetland areas are protected. Any disturbed areas with deferred construction activities must have fully established ground stabilization through vegetative cover to the satisfaction of the duly authorized agent for review and approval prior to moving on to a subsequent phase. I think for review and approval is kind of unnecessary as well because it's to the satisfaction of.
Yes, I agree.
And then, let's see.
This is Commissioner Begamon. Can I ask something or are you in the middle of a thought?
So let's see. Must have ground stability. The other thought I had was potentially to rephrase it to say fully established ground stabilization to the satisfaction of the duly authorized agent through vegetative cover or other means acceptable to the agent prior to moving on. Yeah. If we want to be a little bit more open-ended to other possible solutions.
Commissioner Begamon, that was my concern, that if it was in a time period where you can't plant anything, they'd have to come up with another matting or something for erosion.
To the satisfaction of the duly authorized agent through vegetative cover or other means acceptable to the agent prior to moving on to a subsequent phase.
Yeah.
Anything else? As the record indicates, the importance of the basin construction being overseen by a licensed geotechnical engineering firm. Certification that construction was completed in compliance with the approved plans shall be submitted prior to any activity related to phases 3 or 4 commencing. Given that the basin is to be constructed in phase 2. Any questions? 13, a licensed surveyor shall identify in the field layout of site components, including but not limited to clearing limits, erosion controls, stormwater system components, buildings, access drives, and parking areas, and cuts and fills for site grading. After completion of the project, an as-built property/boundary survey must be submitted to the IW agent showing compliance prior to issuance of the certificate of occupancy. In addition to the items listed in the standards for surveys and maps in the state of Connecticut, the property boundary survey shall also depict the location of wetlands, graded wetlands, final grading, and location of stormwater structures with invert elevations. A qualified PE or land surveyor shall certify that the grading and stormwater system on site is consistent with this approval. Questions or comments? All right. 14, certification that final cleaning of the stormwater system occurred after completion of construction shall be submitted to the IW agency. Standard one. 15, as stormwater maintenance is an integral component of the proposed stormwater treatment, copies of the stormwater maintenance record shall be made available to the agency upon request, Exhibit 22, to document compliance with this permit. I referenced Exhibit 22 because it specifies that the report should be made available to the, I don't remember if it says town or agency. You can look it up if you want to know. Any questions, concerns?
This is Commissioner Basserman. I guess it, and I think this came up earlier in the discussions this evening about where in the conditions is the requirement that the association is in charge of the maintenance of those stormwater components.
Great segue. Number 16. Prior to the execution of a contract for the sale of the first unit, a copy of the sections of the public offering statement, which establishes the obligation of the condominium association to follow site maintenance and best management practices, shall be submitted to the agency for review and approval. The document should address at minimum A, maintenance/management of the stormwater management infrastructure, B, short and long-term maintenance of the wetland mitigation areas, C, vegetation management as outlined in the tree and maintenance plan and explained in Exhibit 61 and at the January 9th, 2025 section of the public hearing. D, integrated pest management or IPM plan, which outlines the best management practices to be implemented to reduce the use and impacts of fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides within the areas to be maintained as lawn. And E, requirement that hired landscapers and other site management companies are to be made aware of their responsibilities to comply with the approved management plans. And based on discussion earlier, I think we might want to make reference to the conservation restriction area as well.
This is Commissioner Begemon. For the integrated pest management, you're limiting it to this sentence limits it to the areas to be maintained as lawn. But let's say there's a rodent outbreak. You also, in the houses, I think you also want an integrated pest management approach to be used for inside the homes too. You're right next to a preserve. You don't want people using
lawn and managed areas.
Well, I don't know. Can you say anything about homeowners for their own homes? For instance, it would be very discouraging to see indiscriminate bait boxes outside people's homes that have like second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, right? That we wouldn't want that. So it's not just what they're putting on their lawn. It could be.
I see your concern. I think my thought was that we don't want to encourage them to maintain areas that aren't really necessarily supposed to be maintained, which is kind of the opposite of what you're getting at. So within areas to be maintained, I mean, the house is maintained. I don't know.
Oh, you could just leave out. Oh, this Commissioner Begemon, if you just left out within the areas to be maintained, just to be implemented to that best management, integrated pest management, which outlines the best management practices to be implemented, etc. Without, you could leave out without,
like everything after implemented.
No, keep to reduce the use and impacts of fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides, period.
Okay.
That's it.
Yep. Because they shouldn't be in areas that aren't being maintained anyways. It should be self-evident. Okay, so then we also wanted to add notification. Of conservation or identification. Identification of conservation restriction area and notification of associated restrictions.
Yes.
Anything else for this section?
Commissioner Begman, two questions. In the hearing, we had talked about timing for blasting of the rock that they're doing to avoid nesting times of birds. That was recommended. That's one thing. And then the other question I have, which was for maintenance of the detention basin, are there vehicles that are going to have to go anywhere, or is that maintenance all done by hand? Because I believe that, I mean, we didn't talk about this at all, but I'm thinking about they're supposed to be designated like pathways for vehicles to go so they don't destroy things. If you need vehicles to maintain a detention basin, so
Yeah, so they do have kind of this, I believe it's a grass surface, if I recall correctly, that was asked and is on the record somewhere, but they do have this access path on the side of the basin, should they have to access to maintain the outlet for the emergency spillway.
Thank you.
And then as far as like maintenance of the mitigation areas, as they establish, any ongoing maintenance should be stuff that could be done by hand, I would think.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, I know we talked about it, but was there any resolution on snow storage, a location, or the treatment thereof? And did we deal with that in the condition?
I don't think the treatment of snow was discussed, but the storage was, and I think I'm scrolling the wrong way, but we'll go all in and then find out for sure. Yeah. All right, the teal areas adjacent to the roadway. So inside the cul-de-sac, on the outer edge here, on the western side of southern piece here, kind of in the center, and then on the eastern side of the road adjacent to buildings 1 and 2, and kind of on both sides of the main entrance portion of the road. And I believe they had made a comment about if there's an excess of snow, that it would be removed from site.
This is Commissioner Begman. I think, are there best management practices for salting? And I think that's what Mr. Chair Bassman is talking
So
about.
the storage, so like I said, the storage, yes, but the maintenance of it, I don't believe was discussed.
On the record, right? Okay.
This is Commissioner Boda. Just going back to that mitigation area for a minute. I don't actually recall if we ever talked about markers around the edge as we've traditionally done, kind of denoting that it is a conservation area.
I don't believe that was discussed. There is a split rail fence proposed along what I would call the most likely interface with it. So you can see here the deed restricted conservation area language. The line runs parallel to the road adjacent to buildings 1 and 2, and then it takes a turn behind building 4. And you can see the call out for the split rail fence at the top of slope that follows the conservation restriction area behind building 4. And then it blends back into kind of an undisturbed portion of the site. It does look like there's a gate. That's interesting. A gate, and then it terminates when it ties into the existing or the proposed tree line.
So maybe we could, I'm gonna go back. The conservation restriction languages. So maybe with number 8, we can G 8G. We can know.
I think. Sorry, I'm thinking maybe it makes sense to put it on the site plan. So maybe having it be a modification to
Okay. So
the site plan, assuming that you're looking for some sort of marcation of that line.
yeah. So okay.
And then that way it would also be filed, you know, it would be part of that map that gets filed on the land records.
2. So maybe 2F. Is that what you were thinking was a better spot?
I think so.
Okay, so for 2F, we would add on the site plan conservation markers to be placed on you said the fence?
On the boundary of the conservation restriction.
On the boundary of the conservation restriction.
I'm just going to toggle back to that plan real quick. Do you want it to be the full
Thanks. Yes.
the full boundary within the parcel? Like, I'm assuming you don't care about them doing the far side.
No, right. I think anywhere where there's any possibility of a lawnmower or a landscaper or
yeah, so I'm just going to scroll to the next plan real quick where you can see the slope. So I mean, ideally there shouldn't be unit owners going over here and making changes, but I think that it's still beneficial and to mark that out clearly so that everyone's aware. I think that we want whatever it's going to be minimal as far as disturbance. So probably like not a fence through the entire thing, but
I thought you said that line was a fence. I'm sorry.
So
I misunderstood what you were saying.
So part of it, let's see. Part of it's confusing because I don't think it's fully shown. Okay. So here is this gray line is the conservation restriction, and this portion of the conservation restriction has a fence. And then either side of the fence has an open area where the fence does not extend. So
And they could do cedar posts. I mean,
Yeah. Conservation markers should be placed on the boundary of the conservation restriction area. In addition to the proposed split rail fence, or to supplement the split? Or you want the fence labeled too?
yeah, yes. To clearly show the conservation boundary. For all to see, forever and ever.
Here's Commissioner Basserman. Do you need the ad at the beginning?
I think so. Show.
All right, I just, conservation markers need to be placed.
Prior to start of work, the following changes shall be made to the plans to submit for review and approval. Conservation markers to be placed on the internal boundary of the conservation restriction area to clearly show limits of boundary on site. Should I say to the satisfaction of the duly authorized agent or anything like that? You want it to be reviewed?
That sounds, yes, that sounds great.
This is Commissioner Begemon. Can I go back to the blasting idea?
Yes. I'm hesitant because I wrote down notes of the two things you talked about, and I've got blasting timing and I've got maintenance, and I have no idea what the maintenance one was.
That's okay. It's Commissioner Begemon. You talked about the maintenance of the retention basin,
okay.
The passing on. In 8B, we talk about the wetland scientist having, to do the mitigation work in July and August.
Mm-hmm.
Who would determine the best timing possible for blasting, and would it be a recommendation, I assume?
Yeah, so generally speaking, there needs to be a nexus to the impact to the wetlands.
This is Commissioner Gokowski. Don't they have to file for special permits for the blasting? And doesn't that go through the building department?
I'm not sure what the requirements for the blasting approval would be. I don't know that there's a review that would look at specifically impacts to wildlife. And I wouldn't go in section 8 because I really doubt that there would be blasting involved in that section of the site work.
That's mitigation.
You're right. I think that if you wanted to add a condition, it would probably be a standalone. You could put something like blasting schedule. Blasting. So there's like 4 different phases, and each phase theoretically could encounter a situation where they need to blast.
Is the only thing, this is Commissioner Basserman, is the only thing on the record regarding blasting birds?
I think that the Friends of the Farm River Association had raised the concern. It basically had requested that the applicant avoid nesting season in particular, and that they consider. Let's pull up rather than putting words in their mouths.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, we never, in my recollection, we never talked about wetland species as being affected with blasting, did we?
Well, I mean, theoretically, those bird populations are probably interacting with wetland species, but then whether those wetland species that are being impacted are having a physical impact on the wetland itself. It's going to be near the end. Backwards. Public comment. Friends of the Farm River Estuary. Finally, with respect to the construction phase of the project, FFRE requests that the Commission consider the potential impacts of those activities, including blasting on local wildlife and water quality. Okay, so also like airborne particles, perhaps, in settling. FFRE believes it would be appropriate to restrict construction activities to periods of the year where species such as osprey and endangered waterfowl are not nesting. The impacts of blasting, in particular on nesting behavior, is well documented. Moreover, blasting activities have shown to contribute to nitrogen pollution. Maybe something like measures to reduce impacts associated with blasting shall be considered, including but not limited to dust control and time of year.
Probably as good as you're going to get. I mean, the particles are going to be there, whether it's March or September.
I definitely see the nexus with dust control. And I think I think the concern relative to, wildlife has been raised, and I think, there's the potential that they would ideally try to take that into consideration. I don't think that the commission can stop site work during nesting season entirely. And I don't know that you could prohibit them from blasting during nesting season, but I think you could encourage it.
And this is Commissioner Begman. Jamie, when you use the word nexus, you mean like a direct impact? When you see the nexus of on the wetlands?
Yeah, so like one of the phrases I think that's kind of used in wetland regulation is significant nexus. So you have to show cause and relation, right? It can't be that it may. It has to be kind of that it will. And
specifically to the functioning of the wetland, not necessarily the components that interact with it.
Right.
So a bird that interacts with the wetland isn't necessarily protected because it impacts with the wetland. It's rather its impact upon the wetland and its chemistry.
Yeah, based on kind of case law, if you will, the general takeaway is that any regulation of wildlife has to relate to the physical impact to a wetland or watercourse. It can't just be a impact to the wildlife itself.
Just Commissioner Papantonis, Jamie, isn't the phrase you're thinking of causal nexus?
It might be the legal phrase that relates. I'm not familiar with that. I know that I have seen significant nexus in materials that I have read relative to Connecticut wetland regulation, whether that's a legal term or just a term that is used in various readings that I've read. I'm not sure.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Can't you just say best management practices should be used when blasting is performed to reduce the amount of particulates that are caused by such blasting?
I'm going to type what I had kind of written down as I was talking earlier, and then we can go from there. Measures to reduce, that's a nice word, reduce impacts associated blasting shall be I think there might be a better word than considered. Including what needed to dust control and I mean, a time of year is really open-ended. I guess if we want to, we could say and nesting season. Again, that's really what we're trying to get at. I don't know.
So even nesting season is tough. I mean, this is Commissioner Boat. I mean, nesting season is February. It's starting, right? So nesting season starting right now is like bald eagles are going to be starting soon, and it's gonna run all the way through. And if you're talking about birds or turtles or
Yeah, and I think that I don't know. I don't know. All I know, we've already kind of gone over the restrictions of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency to regulate wildlife, but I think that there's likely some agency that has jurisdiction, particularly if there's nesting on site or near the site, that would probably come into play. I don't know what that agency would be or, what that process would look like. We've had other sites where there was nesting on site. Osprey specifically, and I'm not aware of. I think the biggest impact was the nest was relocated where they annually were nesting, was relocated as part of the project, and that was something that Eversource, the utility that was where the nest was responsible for initiating. So kind of out of the control of the applicant, if you will. But the applicant went and created a new nesting location for them in the future. So I think that it's something that would kind of get sorted out if it became.
This is Commissioner Bassman. You sure you want to put in nesting season?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm putting it there because it's part of the discussion.
Right. I mean, as opposed to put a period at the end of control, and since we're not going to be able to control based on wetland regulations when they do it. Time of year might be a middle ground.
So how about measures to reduce impacts associated with blasting shall be, I'm going to say implemented, including but not limited to dust control. And then we can put and time of year, or we can just put period after control.
I'm okay with that in time of year because at least it potentially gives you a hook to have a discussion.
This is Commissioner Bigman. Are there best management practices to reduce environmental, like wetland impacts of blasting? Would that be better than to say measures? I don't know if there are best management practices, but I would assume there are.
I mean, I guess that's repetitive control measures, best management practices to reduce impacts associated with blasting shall be implemented, including not limited to dust control and time of year. There should be another comma. I feel like.
That's good.
Any additional thoughts, comments, feedback?
No changes, this is Commissioner Bassman, no changes on the standard conditions, Jamie?
Standard conditions are standard. And general provisions are also standard. They come directly from the regulations. I didn't specifically ask if there was any comments or feedback on the whereas clauses, if you will, the findings. I don't know if anyone wanted to discuss any of those points in particular.
No.
So, not to interrupt flow of discussion, certainly, any points in the document that you want to discuss further. I just also want to remind the commission that we do also have that fee reduction request prior to making a motion regarding a decision.
Are we good with this part? Do we have that now?
Do you want me to share the fee reduction request? And I do have a document that outlines what the application fee was for the subject application and the withdrawn application.
Yeah, if you could kind of summarize where, so with the first application, like what did they pay? Like, is it that they just don't want to pay twice? I mean, I can't blame somebody for not wanting to pay twice. This is quite a project. I don't want the town to be subsidizing. So
so in the reduction request, they outline the fact that they have paid the application fee for 2 applications, and they have paid for a peer review.
hold on. I want to separate those two because the peer review, like, that's on them. That's not part of. Again, I'm not interested in the town subsidizing, and they had 2 peer reviewers because of their process. So can we just talk about the application fee for a minute? How much did they pay for the first application, not including the peer review?
Not including the peer review, they paid $11,743 for the first application.
11,743, and is there that $50, no, $60 state fee?
Correct.
That $743 includes the $60 state fee, or it does not?
It includes the $60 state fee and $300 public hearing fee.
And those we cannot. Okay, so three. Okay, so 11,383 is that's their kind of pay in minus if we don't consider the deep or the public hearing fee for application 1.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'm sorry, I don't mean to take over, but I just I want us to move forward.
Absolutely.
And could you, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, and I'm still going to anyway. Do you think you could estimate approximately the number of hours that you and Katie spent managing this?
I anticipated that question, and I tried to consider how I could reasonably come up with a number that I wasn't just gonna say. We did have the public hearing notices, opened a public hearing for that application. We had sent out the peer review request. Of course, the peer review was carried over to the current application. So, I mean, are you saying how much time specifically on that application that may not have necessarily carried through to the review of the subsequent application?
I think right now I just want I'm looking for the original numbers from application 1. And then maybe we can compare it to what application 2 is, and we can see where the difference might be.
So, Are you including the site walk in that?
So as far as the amount of hours spent, I did not calculate something out because, like I said, I didn't know how I could reasonably come up with a number that I'd be confident in. There's review of the application that is intermittent, gets interrupted by other people coming in. It gets, picked back up when the peer review contacts. We
Yeah,
don't
it's
sit here
messy.
and say, wait 1 minute, time, okay, this is this project, this is that project. We don't
Right.
have projects that we have to bill, so we spend our time trying to be efficient and getting what we can done when we can get it done. So I really don't have any way to come up with a number other than guesstimating, and I would not want to bet my life on how many peanuts there are in the jar. So I honestly do not know how to give a number that I'd be confident was representative of time spent.
This is Commissioner Goklowski. Jamie, between both applications, you've spent an enormous amount of time. I mean, even this final draft notice that you prepared, I mean, that you didn't pull that out of your hat and put that together in 10 minutes. This application, and this is only my opinion, it wasn't the commission's fault that they withdrew the first application and had to reapply. So it had nothing to do with the commission or any fees that were charged. Now, I understand fair is fair, but I just want to point that out, that it's not the commission's fault that they withdrew the application.
This is Commissioner Begeman. Would a helpful way to think about it be how far through the process did we get the first time compared to the second time? And think about that as a way of looking at a fee reduction in terms of typical hours spent at of a big project like this. Just putting it out there. I don't know.
So the application fee is meant to be from submission to sunset. So basically it's for the review of the application and for permit compliance. And so on larger applications like this, the fee kind of compounds quickly at a certain point. And in particular, with this application where there's a lot of direct wetland impact, you look at the Schedule A fee, that's the activity proposed within a wetland itself. And that is because there's a lot more that goes into the review of the application, and there's a lot more that goes into compliance with the application. So to that end, the staff time spent on reviewing an application is only a portion of the time that we spend on a project. So arguably anything post-approval would not, that's not happening twice. And the review process, there were changes. However, there was a lot from the first application that did carry over and was carried over to the second application. So I think would be consistent with past practice to grant a reduction. Unfortunately, as far as providing a solid recommendation as to what extent, I don't have great guidance for the commission on that.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Jamie, given when you said past practice, forget the numbers for the moment. Did we have a record of what we considered as the elements when we decided to grant a fee reduction for a project that had, multiple applications?
Yeah, so I think generally the common denominators have been that the application was withdrawn kind of due to timing constraints, sometimes preemptively before we got to the timing constraints, and sometimes as we approached it, and that the project was substantially similar to what was originally submitted. So it wasn't like they went back to the drawing board and brought back a completely different project. Here, the biggest change from submission to where we ended, I would say, was in the review of the wetland extent and the subsequent analysis of wetland impact and mitigation.
I want to ask a question that maybe feels personal, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate, but I'm going to ask, and you can tell me, I don't know, whatever you want. Do you think that you could give me, between you and Katie, a ballpark average? Because I'm gonna assume that each of you spent 20 hours on application one. I'm just going to assume. That seems like, just having done project management, having worked, I know how many hours I've spent. Do you think that you could give me a rough number of what you believe the town spends on, like, hourly, that would include your healthcare and like that number for the average for the two of you? So not necessarily your wage, not Katie's wage, but the average of the two of you plus your, what the town pays out, basically.
Sure. So we do have a blended rate, if you will, that was used for the fee analysis when the commission was looking to revise their fees. So it is a bit old, and I don't think it includes all of the benefits, but it's the number that I have, and that's $40. I think it was just under 40, but we'll say $40.
And what year is that from?
I honestly can't tell you for sure without looking it
from
up.
This decade?
Yes. It's from the past 10 years. It's from when I was working for the town.
I was going to call it 50 because, things.
And also town council's been looped in on, this application, and his pay rate is much higher.
Oh, that's true.
He's also spent significantly less time relatively on it, but.
Sure. Okay.
This is Commissioner Begman. Commissioner Boda, are you still working on something?
I'm just playing with numbers over here, so
Okay.
Don't mind me.
Okay. So in terms of these application fees, what proportion is usually thought of as coming before the approval, and how much after? Because as you said, you don't do the approval part twice. And it seems to me that the easiest thing to do is to figure out what percentage that is and take that off.
Yeah, I think it's project specific.
Right, but this number is Commissioner Begman, but this total application fees had to come from somewhere, these estimates of why it costs them that application fee.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about it, the project is, the applicant had represented that it would probably be 3 to 3.5 years, I believe, to construct the project. And then we also have 5 years of monitoring. So there's arguably 5 to 8 years of follow-up from when a shovel goes in the ground. And we're going to be doing inspections. We have to make sure we get reports. Arguably after the 3.5 year mark, we're not going out and doing inspections. It's more of like an annual check-in. There's provisions when it goes to planning and zoning and when it goes to building.
This is Commissioner Wasserman. Jamie, remind me again why the gun is to our head to deal with the fee reduction tonight,
I don't think
given
you
the
can.
fact
I don't
given
think
the
you
fact
can,
that we have a deadline for the application itself. Why are we marrying the fee reduction in the same boat?
because you can't grant a fee reduction after you've made a decision on an application. At that point, the record is closed and moved on to the next thing.
Okay, I have a thought. I just have an option. I mean, this is like, I don't know, whatever. Chairman, were you set? Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
What's the fee for application number 2?
Without the peer review, the total application fee was $16,981.
Okay. So my suggestion is that we reduce the fee for application number 1 by $8,383. So that we're not really sort of double dipping with a number of these fees. What that does is that takes out, so they're still paying the deep fee, they're still paying the public hearing fee, they're still paying an amount for the town staff time. I did 20 hours each, a total of 40 hours at the blended rate, and added an additional $1,000 for town council. So that was $3,000 taken out. And so that brought us to a reduction of, to reduce their fee by $8,383. And if we did that, that would bring their total fee for application 1.
So real quick, it would have to be a reduction of the current application fee. So basically kind of giving them a credit from the previous application.
All right, I can do that. But okay, wait, so say the new one is 16,000 what?
981.
981. Okay, so 16,981 minus 8,383. All right, yeah. So that would give them a new application fee of $8,000 for this application, $8,598. Now, it is 9:09. My nighttime brain is not as good as my morning brain, but that's my suggestion.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Commissioner Boda,
Yeah.
The 20 surrogate that you used was for application 1, I believe you said, right?
Yes.
And 2, I guess the point that Commissioner Begeman raised, did staff spend more time with application 2 than we did with application 1?
I did not do the same exercise for application number 2.
Oh.
I just left it alone. Didn't go in and do any kind of fussing with that. We're just going to leave it alone. What I did was essentially do a reduction to their application fee for the first application because they ended up throwing it out. Now, there are things that they still have to pay for because that's not our responsibility.
Okay.
This is Commissioner
Got
Gopowski. I remember in one of our discussions when this question came up, I believe that it was decided that we would visit this and base it on application 1 and give them a credit towards the application 2. I believe that was discussion at one of the meetings.
That's the idea. So that's my suggestion, that their fee for for this new application that we're in be $8,598.
Got a
Is that
motion?
That's I'd like to. What is this application number? Hold on.
24,902.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we approve a fee reduction for inland wetland 240902. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, 15, 17 Beacon Hill Road and Beacon Hill Road. That we grant a fee reduction from $16,981 to $8,598 based on the fact that they withdrew their first application. This is a second application. And this new fee ensures that the applicant does not double pay the town for the same materials, and at the same time, the town is not subsidizing the applicant by paying for town staff hours or town council hours or the public hearing fee or the DEP fee.
Is there a second to that motion?
Commissioner Gopowski, I second that motion.
Any further discussion? Well, we do separate votes here, correct, Jamie? For the fee reduction as well, and then the
Yeah, and
application.
roll call vote, please.
Yes. Okay, Commissioner Gokowski,
Commissioner Gopowski, aye.
Commissioner Papatonis,
Commissioner Papantonis, nay.
Commissioner Begeman,
Commissioner Begman, aye.
Commissioner Boda,
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. All right, we now have the other item, which is the application itself. Does anybody feel not ready at this point to vote? Okay, we're going to take we need a motion on the table for inland wetland 240902, 1 through 17 Beacon Hill Road and Beacon Hill Road, which is an age-restricted housing development. Is there a motion for inland wetland 240902?
This is Commissioner Boda. I will make a motion to approve inland wetland 240902, 1 through 17 Beacon Hill Road, using the draft resolution dated February 13th, including the revisions that were added and discussed during the February 13th meeting, February 13th, 2025, including the resolutions, the conditions, the standard conditions, and the general provision in the issuance of all permits.
Is there a second to that motion? Commissioner Basserman will second that motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, take a roll call vote. Commissioner Gokowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Begeman,
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Papatonis,
Commissioner Papantonis, nay.
Commissioner Boda,
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. And I think we've got everybody. So 240902 is hereby approved. Jamie, anything else on 240902?
No.
Okay. By the way, I would like to comment on a job well done by staff throughout this process, especially bringing it all together in this draft resolution. I think we would be still discussing many items if it weren't for the 6-page memorandum that staff prepared. So good job, guys.
Thank you, thank you. And amen to that.
Okay, enforcement activity. Cease and correct 240701, 15 and 7 Beacon Hill Road. Vegetation removal and earth disturbance within the wetland and the adjacent upland area, which is a continuation of a show cause hearing that we've had. Jamie, where do we stand with this cease and correct?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So just as a quick recap, there was some disturbance when they were investigating the wetland area to be investigated to the wetland, specifically removal of vegetation and some minor ground disturbance. The area did revegetate. I don't really think there's much to do at this exact moment. A permit was just issued. It has not been implemented. I think maybe the reasonable thing to do here would be to maybe continue this to, say, the May 8th meeting, where you request an update from the wetland scientist, have them go out to an investigation, see what the current condition is, whether there's anything that needs to happen, arguably between now and implementation of the permit, or should the permit not be implemented to resolve the activity that occurred.
This is Commissioner Basserman, and our practice has been, correct me if I'm wrong, that when there has been a cease and correct issued and an application filed as part, in this case, to deal with the cease and correct, that we typically don't close the cease and correct until the application, or at least part of it, has commenced. Is that correct?
Generally speaking, the act, yes, the cease and correct order doesn't get lifted until the corrective action or compliance with the permit has been completed. This is kind of a unique situation, I would say. At this point, there's been no determination regarding the order, so it is in place until the commission makes a decision. I think not knowing what's going to happen, with future approvals needed and all of that, and knowing that the site did revegetate, it makes sense to wait until we can at least get, a site assessment done by the soil scientist and kind of an update of where they are in, their approval process. And I think May 8th is probably a reasonable time to at least check in and see where things are. Unless the commission feels differently, and with it being a show cause hearing, I don't know if you want to open it up real quick, or I think you should open it up real quick to see if the owner representation has anything that they want to add to the discussion.
My take is that the continuation probably makes a lot of sense, unless, Mr. Anderson, you feel that there's some new information that would change that recommendation.
No, Doug Anderson for the record. Yeah, no, we'll have George go out and do an assessment on it once the snow's off the ground, or if he can do it with the snow on the ground, we can do that too.
Does any commissioner feel that it's inappropriate to extend it until the May meeting? We don't need a motion on that, do we, Jamie? We can just continue this, or do we Need a
Yeah.
roll call vote.
No.
Okay. Let's see. Notice of violation, 301 Maple Street, removal of the vegetation without a permit. We're just we discussed that as agenda item 5B, which can we deal with that now?
I think we should deal with it when we get to that item.
For the
Essentially, it was a notice
application?
of violation that required an application to be submitted. So we did receive an application, and I think we should discuss the two.
Okay. Then next up, cease and correct 240902, 17182 Leeds Island Road, declaring an earth disturbance without a permit, continuation of show cause hearing. You've had some correspondence, or at least verbal correspondence to date on this?
Yes, so there's been a couple of continuances of time so that the property owner could get information the commission requested. Essentially, there was some activity on site adjacent to and within wetland areas. The property owner hired a wetland scientist to conduct an investigation. We received that report. The commission, there was some discussion about activities potentially being of an agricultural nature and potentially as of right or non-regulated. So the commission requested a jurisdictional ruling request be submitted if that was, the property owner's interpretation of the activities they were doing, and that a site or a map of the property showing the wetland extent and location of stone placed be submitted. So we did receive that map, and then today at 4:43. I did receive a jurisdictional ruling request. I did not have a chance to look at it before the meeting, but I can pull it up. And the property owner is present this evening. So does the commission want to start by recapping on the cease and correct order, or by reviewing that site plan, or by hearing from the property owner?
Why don't we take it in the order that you just suggested, the review of the cease and correct, and then the information provided by the homeowner?
All right, so the cease and correct order, they contacted the office. Like I said, they had a wetland scientist go out and do a field investigation. Subsequent, and it says an assessment of any direct or indirect impacts to the wetland from recent site work and recommendations to address those impacts. Restoration plan shall be submitted to address any direct wetland impacts. So we kind of paused on the second half of 3.2. We got an initial report from wetland scientists, and then the discussion about whether or not there might be as of right activities came up. And there was a modified nope. So at the October 24th meeting, a site map showing the location of wetlands extent of stone located within wetland areas was to be submitted, and a jurisdictional ruling request accompanied by a proposal/narrative and a 2-scale site plan, so the commission can determine whether activities conducted/proposed are as of right. It was discussed that the plan does not need to be an A2 survey. While no decision was specifically made regarding a tree survey, I would recommend that the plan should include an assessment of the trees that are planned to be used as part of the silviculture use. To assist in understanding, the plan should include any existing and or proposed site improvements associated with the ruling request. And then,
Is Commissioner Bassman, do we have number 1 completed?
yeah, we have received a document. Bear with me a minute. Did it not make it into the Dropbox?
If there's a way to share it, I could share it as well.
Yeah, I can share from my email.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So Leeds Island Road is at the bottom of the page. We've got the dark line here is the wetland line annotated by REMA Ecological Services LLC. And then we've got the approximate location of the gravel, and the commission has any questions, I'll defer to the property owner to respond to those. Unless you want to see the jurisdictional ruling request form as well prior to discussing with the property owner.
Now, this Commissioner Wasserman, is this a to-scale drawing, Jamie?
Mr. Onofrio, can you respond to
Yes,
that?
sure. Rick Onofrio, and this is not, as we spoke the last time that we all met. There was the discussion that it wasn't required for an A2. It's the footprint of the property is an A2. It's built off of that, and the actual overall dimensions, it was measured out by 300-foot tape measure, and it's approximate. The roads, to put it into a little bit more perspective, it is like, for instance, if you look at the line below the REMA wetland delineation mark, that line I had put in there is the original watercourse pathway, right? So that was the intermittent natural drainage that was on the property. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, and then to the left, you can see 12-inch CMP. So it's conduit pipe that's traveling underneath the abutting driveway, and then it continues down Leeds Island Road underneath properties contiguous to that. And I put that in there. That has since dried up, and I could get into more detail with that at the next step. But to answer your question, it's close. It's not 100%, but the lineup was taken off of, off the front apron of the street, so -8 feet from around, and then also to that drainage pipe, and then from measurements also, there's multiple measurements taken. So the start of the road in the end of the road on the lower loop there, the road is approximately, it flares out in a couple spots, larger, to make the corners, but overall, they're about 15 to 20 feet wide, and it might not see that clearly, but most there's all big areas in the center, wooded and untouched, and all around the sides and perimeter, and then west of the street side of the lower section, which is beneath the watercourse area. That's all still intact, other than I did clean up some minimal trees that were there, but growth of, as REMA put it, invasive species and pricker bushes and vines.
Okay.
And that was just really just the extent of it from that point on. So
thank you. Thank you. I'm good. Jamie, why don't we deal with unless another commissioner has a question here.
No, this is Commissioner Bodo. I'm just saying good night.
Good night.
Oh, good night.
Jamie, can you post now the jurisdictional ruling
Yeah, 1 minute.
request?
All right, so request, believe it as of right. Be attached for additional information. I don't think I had anything else attached. Did you need to submit something else, Mr. Onofrio?
I did, and the reason for that, as I explained in the email, was that I had a internal server issues, and I had to basically kind of start that over, which I did, and I do have notes available, but I didn't want to submit it formally. So that's the reason I guess you didn't get it today.
Well,
But I'd be happy to go in detail with it with you.
Jamie, just Commissioner Bassman, would we consider this as receipt of a jurisdictional ruling request, or do we need to have a more complete package for it to be considered?
I think you would want some more information. I don't know if you want to start reviewing it to try and help ensure that you're getting all the information you want, or if you feel that additional information is needed to even.
I mean, I could walk through it just based on, what I know and what my thoughts are here and the facts of the situation. But it'd probably be good for you guys to have something to reference because,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Instead of just
a quick
trying to
refresher for the commissioners of what it is that you're looking to do. And
yeah.
then
So
that way
basically, and I also.
1 minute.
Excuse me.
1 minute. I want to finish what I was saying. A quick update for the commissioners of what it is you're looking to do, and then that way the commissioners can see if there's anything in addition to that October 24th letter that they want to highlight should be submitted.
Yep.
To consider your request.
Yeah. So basically, what I intend to do is with the creation of the farm, obviously, and I am trying to understand. We're obviously understanding what the site is and where these delineations are, which, as you mentioned, I had obtained another soil scientist who actually was his specialty was in the drainage and surface water drainage and also in wetlands. He's a board member he works for actually the town of Middletown. And when I came across with him and spoke with him and we met on site to discuss one of the issues and one of the things for consideration, which I had included in the application, was of the oncoming disturbance of the drainage. And I understand a lot of those conditions and, what's exempt on certain parts. However, the best technology being used for that came into question. So I do have a section on that I like to discuss, and that's why I brought him in. When he visited the site, he had his own ideas of where those delineations were on the wetlands, because we actually poked around some additional areas, obviously, and more so than went under REMA. And he started, from his considerations, he thought it came up a little further down. It came down the line there. But with that said, and I intend to do the maple syrup farm, and potentially down the road. This is all new to me, obviously, and that's what I'm trying to do. I originally bought the property to prevent tree houses from going up because they were selling it as a multi-home lot. My parents live in the back. I don't have any, other than tapping the trees, the maples that are all there, maybe some bee, some honey. I don't have any plans to, to build on it or anything, develop the land at this point, other than a farm and a road, a driveway going in, a roadway to access, which would be used from the farming, application there. And that's where I'm at. And everything's a close line. Where it was really disturbed as you guys put it, with some stone base. From there to the real area of the wetlands itself, I mean, it's to the point that's pretty negligible. And
Excuse me, this is Commissioner Bassman. I guess
yeah,
one thing that I think we're going to certainly need is the soil report from the original soil scientist
we have that. Yeah,
and the soil report from the most recent assessment.
right. And that I'm waiting on. Right.
Okay.
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent, just to expand on that real quick. So we've got the soils report from the wetland investigation that was done by the previous property owner as part of an assessment study, which is, I think, what was being referred to as far as 3 lots. There was never approval to split it into 3 lots, but I think it was being sold with the concept that it could potentially be subdivided.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and I'm just putting some context for commissioners. So we have got that soil report, I believe, from 2016, plus or minus a couple years, and then we have the assessment from George Logan with Brema. And part of the original order was if the wetland line was different from what was delineated in 2016 to address that, the recent activity relative to that assessment. So, that any of the stone deposited in the wetland isn't what's changing whether it's considered a wetland or not now. Because obviously the activity that has occurred, was without review by the commission and not approved or declared a jurisdictional ruling prior to it occurring. So we want to know what that condition was prior to the recent activity.
This is Commissioner Goklowski. The applicant, he was going to use the maple trees to get syrup from. Is that what you were going to do?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're not planting any additional trees. You have the trees already on the property.
They were not. Yeah, I mean, nothing that wasn't diseased or dead and falling over was not touched. So I left everything else as it was.
And how many maple trees would you say you have still remaining on the property?
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Okay. And what is the total square? What is the
less
yard?
than 2.9 acres.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Jamie, this is Commissioner Bassman. What do we typically want for a jurisdictional ruling, beyond the soil reports?
So we need to see the location of all proposed, and in this case, recently conducted activities on site relative to the wetlands, and a narrative of what it is that's being proposed to occur for consideration relative to whether it's an as of right or an exempt activity. I think that it had been discussed at the October meeting that it might be helpful to have an assessment of the trees to be tapped on the site. Is that something that the commission thinks would be helpful in reviewing the request?
Explain assessment a little bit, Jamie, what you mean when you say
like an assessment of the maple trees that will be part of the sap harvesting on site.
If I can make a quick comment
again, is that the health of the trees?
It's the number of trees,
capacity,
the ones that are of mature enough to be tapped, ones that are coming in that could be tapped, that kind of thing.
For the legitimacy of the trees being used for maple syrup production.
To demonstrate the agricultural use on the property.
Right. Got it. Okay. I think that's important for an as of right condition.
This Commissioner Papantonis, I'm a little confused just because I'm looking at section 22A40 subsection 1. And so what exactly is where exactly is the area that caused the cease and correct to happen? Are we complaining about the gravel road, or
I'm sorry, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at the statute 22A40, section 1,
Okay.
that applies to farming.
So the cease and correct order was issued because I didn't have a direct way of contacting the property owner, and it had come to my attention that there had been clearing and ground disturbance on a significant portion of the site. So I wanted to make sure that there was no additional activity, that the property owner was contacting us to discuss what was going on, and to make sure that no additional clearing or regrading or deposition of material was occurring. And then when the property owner received the letter or the order and attended the meeting, he indicated that the activity was for agricultural purposes. So that's when the commission requested the jurisdictional ruling
Okay.
be submitted. So that way you guys could, it's pretty evident per case law that jurisdictional, or that as of right and non-regulated uses are not self-determining, and that the agency has the jurisdiction to determine whether an activity is as of right and or non-regulated. And there was a survey filed on the land records showing the extent of wetlands on the property, which showed approximately the front third of the property to be wetlands.
Yeah, can I actually just make a statement, because there were some people that weren't here in the last meeting that I was in, just to put a little bit into perspective on my end, is that I grew up in the property behind there. My parents still live there. I've went to Branford schools. I've been here my whole life. I used to play in the woods in front of me. My parents have 3 acres in the back. So I know the land, I know the property. It was a farm. It was always farmland before this. It's prime farmland. If you go on any of the soil and water classification maps from the state, you'll see that front, it's never been identified as wetlands originally. And it's always been farming. They used to do hay and plants, flowers over there. And it's the family that had the other farm in the remaining part of the town there next on Leeds on the Road. Actually, it spans over many areas. So that was always farm status. They maintained it as a farm. And that's what I'm trying to do. But what I'd like you to understand is that water course that I put in there, the line right below that wetlands area there, that's no longer even active. And what's been modified was either it was the town or the state, but I remember it clearly. They put in, there's no storm drains on the road. There's no sewer systems on the road. Okay, so they don't have that. They stopped very close to that area. It's up at Red Hill Road. It begins and it goes down there. It continues up Leeds Island. However, because of this modification, they took everything and they re-diverted it from its natural course, brought it back into this area. It made a new waterway. It accumulated sediment and debris into a hump right after where the new trough of waterway is now. And it caused a lot of damage to all the neighboring properties and flooded. And this was roughly around the time in 2016 or whatever it was when they did that survey for the feasibility study. And it was very basic stuff. And they kind of just followed the contour of some of the map classifications. I believe it was 40C is the classification for the state for that optimal farmland with certain characteristics of it or whatever. And, it's because of that, this gentleman that I hired from Middletown, who does the Middletown wetlands, he's a wetlands official, I guess. He understood that. And that's why he poked around further areas and seen how that definitely could change the landscape. And basically that's what's going on there. There's been a lot of different things that have accumulated over the recent years, and a lot of it's based on the stuff that the town or the state did. And I understand there's exemptions in certain areas, but they are supposed to do the best technologies And, as far as monetary for making other decisions on depositing that material, they have to kind of understand what that value is and if it's reasonable. So, I mean, those are the things that have changed. I'm not looking to go down that rabbit hole or anything. However, it did turn something that was farmland not that long ago and everything else, and enough for people to to utilize it to, trying to take, a third of the property.
But the ball is in your court.
Yeah, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So, I mean, when the property was listed, it identified that there were wetlands on the property. There was a map filed on the land record showing the extent of wetlands on the property.
Right.
That 3-lot subdivision concept showed the wetlands on the property. I mean, it was documented that there were wetlands.
Does that have anything to do with what I'm saying now? We have the wetland thing that we just did. I understand where we stand. I'm not arguing with you on that. I'm just trying to give you some background on the history of it. Because part of your application.
But we have to consider where we're at now.
At this point,
right. But listen, part of your application.
Mr. Nofio, this
Yes,
is
sir.
Commissioner Golkowski. What we're trying to say to you is, we have no problem with what you're trying to
Oh,
say.
okay, all right.
But
I
we
just wanted to give you
we
background.
can't- Listen to me,
Okay.
please.
I'm sorry.
We can't proceed without you completing the application with the
Understood.
information that was requested. And once that is done, then we can proceed and make a decision on your application. Right now, we can't make any decisions
Okay.
on anything.
Fair enough. Because I didn't know. I thought this was my last chance to make my statements. Is what I kind of took from the last email that Jamie gave me. So I apologize for that. I'm trying the application, and I'll cut short real quick. I know everybody's trying to go home or go to sleep, but the application states in it that this is the narrative. Write a narrative, give your basis, paint your picture, tell your story for consideration in this, and that's all I was trying to do. There's nothing else to it.
And that's why you put it on the application.
Okay.
so Jamie Frederick in the wetland. At this point, you've come to the table. You've submitted some of the information the commission has requested. You need to submit additional information outlining what it is you're proposing to do, supporting any changes and conditions that you think are applicable to the property relative to what we have documented going back to 2016. And then once that information is submitted, the commission can review that. Now, we don't want to wait another 4 or 5 months for that information. So the question for the commission to discuss with the property owner is, when is a reasonable time for that information to be submitted? Do you want to open it up for the property owner to make a recommendation and then for you to see if that's acceptable? Or do you want to? So, Mr. Onofrio, how long do you think it'll take for your new wetland scientist to complete his analysis and for you to provide any other supplemental information regarding your jurisdictional ruling request, understanding that this has been, ongoing since September at this point?
Right, and I understand that, and we also had Christmas and New Year's, and we had snowstorms. So it's outside. I mean, I'm trying to do the best I can with all this stuff. So I don't, from your online regulations, there's not a place for me that fits in there with the description of everything you need. I mean, if that was the case, you would have implemented the A2 surveys and everything else. So what do you exactly need? If it's just a narrative, and then I could get that to you very quickly. And then the results of the updated, or the addition of the wetland delineation with the new soil scientist, that would probably be after the snow melts and on a day where we could go in there, right? So that would be for that. So is there anything specifically in the application of a standard request for this? You have a list 3 pages long of things to include. Is that applied to me?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. This is not an application. It's a jurisdictional ruling request.
Right.
So I think you should work with your professionals to review the statutes, the regulations, section 4, what is considered as of right, what is not considered as of right. the activities you have conducted, the activities you're proposing to conduct, and how those fit into those categories. And, one thing in particular, so I'm just real quick, pull up section 4. We've been talking a lot about agriculture, whether that's the only applicable or the applicable section, could be open-ended. That's up to you as the property owner to make a determination as to what you think your activities fit into. So it says the following operations and uses shall be permitted in inland wetlands and watercourses as of right per Connecticut General Statutes 22A 40A. The agency shall make the determination as to whether a proposed activity meets the definition that is as of right or is a regulated activity. Grazing, farming, nurseries, gardening and harvesting of crops, and creation of farm ponds of 3 acres or less essential to the farming operation, and activities conducted by or under authority of DEEP for the purposes of wetland or watercourse recreation or enhancement or mosquito control. The provisions of the subsection shall not be construed to include road construction or the erection of buildings not directly related to the farming operation, relocation, reclamation, or watercourses with relocation of watercourses with continual flow, filling or reclamation of wetlands, filling or reclamation of watercourses with continual flow, clear cutting of timber except for the expansion of agricultural cropland, or the mining of topsoil, peat, sand, gravel, and similar material from wetlands, watercourses, or for the purposes of sale. So your narrative and your supplemental materials should address those things. It should also address the wetland extent that was delineated on site, and conceivably any changes that you think are applicable based on your discussion this evening. And the items that have been outlined in the letters that have already been issued. Does the commission have anything to add to that?
I guess this Commissioner Basserman, the credentials of the most recent soil scientist should be included.
This is Commissioner Begemon. Have the property owner met with inland wetlands agent? It might be worthwhile to have a meeting before the next submission. In other words, to review everything and make sure that the things that we're looking for are complete before our next, whenever
Jamie,
we're going to
Frederick,
look
and
at
the
this.
wetland agent. We did meet on site back in, I want to say October, when that was required. And I've indicated that I'm available if there's any questions. So, if it's a question or if you want to set up like kind of a intermittent kind of check-in with staff by all means, just reach out.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Papantonis.
Mr. Onofre, you're going to need some help on this.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to do this on the back of an envelope. You're going to need some professional help and a package that will convince this commission to the end that you want to achieve. We're not here to tell you what's involved in that. The regulations need to be reviewed, and your professionals who hopefully have done this previously will know what's important for this particular effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think based on the language that I was just reading, that filling of wetlands is not considered as of right. So you want to have something to speak to that in regards to the stone that was placed in the wetlands.
Unless it was for farming practices, is the way
it says the provisions of the subsection shall not be construed to include. So
how do you build a road or you do anything on a property if you can't put anything on top of it?
I think I'm not. That's why I'm saying
we're not going to continue this discussion.
I've waited all night myself, man. I've been on the thing all night myself. So we're all spending our time here, right?
Get your help and get the information that this commission needs in front of us so that we can then have a further discussion. Right now, we don't have the information, as Commissioner Goklowski said, to really evaluate anything at this point until you present.
Fair enough.
And I'm trying to relay that that's going to be, I think, one of the points of discussion once they have that additional information. So anything you could provide to that point would be beneficial to your argument.
Okay.
My guess is 30 days might be a bit tight.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially with other people's schedules. I mean, I can't help that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So can we move this to April? Is our meeting in April
We
sufficient
just
time?
moved something, I think that,
Again, Jamie, I'm sorry.
so are you thinking April 10th?
What are the April meetings? Let's put it that way. Why don't we shoot for the 10th?
April 10th gives them 2 months.
Yeah.
In addition to the 4 that's been provided.
And let's hope that the weather cooperates and that April 10th we can kind of get our teeth into this thing.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay.
Any other comments from the commission on this item? Okay. We have no
So
application.
the cease and correct order and the
Remains
jurisdictional
in place.
ruling are continued. The show cause hearing for the cease and correct order 240902 and the
Is
review of the
continued.
jurisdictional ruling request are continued to the April 10th meeting.
Right.
Okay.
No applications for review. Thank you for your presence.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you for your time.
Application for receipt in the wetland 250101 1937 Gould Lane subdivision of 3 lots. The material was sent out. Jamie, it's for receipt. Is there any need for discussion this evening, or can we move along here?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, as you stated, the application is for receipt. The applicant team, I believe, has held on and wanted to give a brief overview. I'm looking and I'm not necessarily seeing because my brain is not working.
Jamie, I don't see
If
him.
anybody's here,
Yeah, I'm not seeing them in the list. Is anyone here for Gould Lane?
250101? No.
Okay, so I'll just really quick say, I do think the commission will want to consider scheduling a public hearing and or a site walk for this application. I don't know if you want to discuss that this evening or table it to the next meeting, but I would suggest looking at the materials prior to the next meeting if you're tabling it. That way that can be discussed and resolved, hopefully at that meeting, at least in regards to the site walk.
This is Commissioner Bassman, and your suggestion for public meeting, is on what basis?
Public interest. We've had a couple of abutting or nearby property owners contacting us since they started flagging and doing, the investigative work on property.
This is Commissioner Begemon. Given weather, should we have set up a couple of dates for possible site walk?
Yeah, so we could either schedule a site walk now, or we could wait and do it at the next meeting since we don't have the applicant here and we don't know what their availability is.
We
and
know
we
what
don't
they
want them to be available.
Can wait.
Let's table this until the next meeting, and hopefully their presence and the weather and our presence will all combine for a good discussion. Next up, 250201 301 Maple, renovations to yard space within 100 feet of a water course. I think there was also information provided in the Dropbox for that.
So wait, we think we might have somebody.
We are here. We get set up. We can schedule a site visit for Gould.
You are here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
My meeting, sorry.
This is Commissioner Begemon. You're very hard to hear.
I didn't recognize the name.
We can set that up.
Okay, so does the commission want to try and schedule a site walk at this time for the property? And then once you've seen the site, you can maybe follow up on the public and you had a chance to look at the materials, you can follow up on whether you think a public hearing is appropriate. I can tell you I'm not available the weekend before our next meeting. To do a weekday, the week of our next meeting, if that works for everyone. It gets dark a little bit later, but it still gets dark pretty early. So we'd probably have to do it around 5 to have enough time to see things. I don't know if that works for everyone.
What's the nature of the property now?
It's most undeveloped with like a garage and a shed on it.
but I mean, in terms of vegetation, it's not difficult, or topography wise, it's
Let
fairly
me
Yeah.
flat.
show the site plan real.
It's walkable and there's trails.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, I closed out of it. And two lots are off of Wood Lane and one's off of Beechwood, so there
Okay.
might be some driving around, but
You could park on Beechwood and walk through to the other two sites.
okay, good.
So what's your suggestion date, Jamie?
I guess I would suggest the 25th or the 26th if it works for everyone.
Works for us.
Mr. Ormrod, I can't. I'll be out of the country. I can't make that.
What time on the 26th works?
Well, I would say probably, I mean, if people can do before 5, that works for me. But I would say for those that are working, trying to aim for 5 would be ideal so that we don't run out of daylight.
5 o'clock on the
Alternatively,
26th?
you guys could have the site walk on the weekend and I could just check in with the property owner and see at a different time. But I think it's helpful when we see it at the same time so that way I'm aware of what the commission's
agree.
looking at. So the 24th also works. I don't know if Mondays are any better or worse for people.
Monday or Wednesday works for me.
Is anyone else
Wednesday.
available Monday or Wednesday, or are we going to have to look at another later date?
Top is available any day.
Commissioner Begeman, I'm available Monday or Wednesday.
Is Commissioner
Gokowski's, Monday or Wednesday's fine.
Commissioner Papantonis, Monday or Wednesday's fine, but not Tuesday.
Right. Right.
Okay, is there a preference for Monday or Wednesday?
I can only make this is Commissioner Ormrod. I can only make Monday.
Oh, you can make Monday, then let's do Monday.
Then let's do Monday.
All right, so Monday Monday the 24th at 5 p.m. Then we'll meet on the Beechwood side and we'll send out information. That'll be on the agenda so that
Yep.
Okay. So is there anything that the commission wants marked out on the property aside from the wetland flags, which I understand are still up to the extent that flags remain in place?
This is Commissioner Begeman. I don't. There were on maps. There were lots marked out, but not necessarily places for houses. Correct?
There were
Your houses.
conceptual locations for houses. 1 minute. Let me pull up the site plan.
It'd be good for those to be marked then. Corners.
So 1 minute. Screen share. All right. So I've scrolled down to this. Everything's being delayed. I'm sorry. Okay, so we've got 3 lots plus a 4th lot open space. There's 2 access off of Gould Lane. There's the proposed house locations. And then each lot also has a proposed wooden split rail fence. But the house would probably give you kind of a general, house and wetland flags should give you kind of a general overview of kind of proximity of things on site. Does the applicant think that they'd be able to get the locations of the proposed houses shown on the site plans marked prior to the 24th on site?
I can, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, if you can do that, and if The soil scientists can attend if they're available. I think that would be ideal in case there's any questions about the location of the wetland.
Okay.
Anything else Commission can think of?
Okay,
Okay, so site walk, and they're gonna flag the corners of the proposed houses and continue it to the February 27th meeting.
yep. All right. Inland Wetland 250201, 301 Maple, renovations to the water course within 100 feet. There was a plan. Jamie, any update other than the plan that was in the Dropbox?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So this started as a notice of violation. An application was to be submitted. An application has been submitted. I don't think the information is sufficient, which I have notified the applicant of and is outlined in an email, which is in the record. So it's just for receipt. So it'll be continued to the February 27th meeting. And I would encourage commissioners to look at those materials prior to that meeting to help facilitate discussion.
And we'll deal with that as well as the NOV at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to continue both to the next meeting.
Okay. We have some other business, some pesticide stuff, which generally we acquiesce to deep with. And we got Inland Wetland 240602. Jamie, you wanted to talk about some bond phasing for East Main Street.
Yeah, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So I was contacted by the project engineer for this property with a bond estimate, and I realized it was for a portion of the site, and I started to realize why it was for a portion of the site. Essentially, this is the old Regal Cinema site where they're converting the cinema building to self-storage and constructing some new residential mixed-use structures. And they're looking to renovate the cinema building into the self-storage. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Smith, who has not been talking for the last couple hours, to provide more information from there.
Hi, good evening. John Schmitz with BL Companies representing the applicant. So basically, obviously remember the project was approved some time ago. The approval conditions included that we provide bonds for erosion control. When we proceeded to planning and zoning, the property was subdivided into 3 separate parcels. So right now, the overall parcel is 3 parcels, one occupied by Walgreens, the other parcel by the cinema building, and then the third parcel right now is basically the parking lot, former parking lot for the cinema. And the cinema is going to be developed by a separate developer than the developer who's going to be developing the residential portion. And so we were going to split. We were looking at doing splitting the bond, so there'd be one bond for the former cinema parcel, and then another bond for the residential piece. And so we just started that process this week with by submitting submitting the bond for the cinema piece. And Jamie and I started having a discussion about how that could be accomplished. That's why we're here tonight, just to kind of get some feedback on that.
So long story short, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, there's a bond to be submitted prior to start of work for erosion controls and plantings and monitoring. It doesn't say anything about phasing it per site or parcels, if you will. I think particularly given that they're looking to start with the renovation, it seems like a somewhat reasonable request. I have requested some additional information beyond what's provided here, essentially clarification as to what site work will be occurring under each phase, if you will, and what the limits of disturbance are, where construction vehicles will be accessing, where any storage or anything is, so that way I can make sure everything is contained and properly addressed for each phase. So I think the question for the commission is, are you okay with that concept? And are you okay with it being reviewed by myself as a duly authorized agent? Or is that something that you think that you need to see and review?
This is Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, I assumed that when we looked at this as kind of one project, that most of the effort associated with staff work was with the new construction as opposed to the renovation.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland agent. Yeah, so I think that's why I said particularly given that they're starting with the renovation. So to me, it seems reasonable given the minor nature of the work that they wouldn't have to submit the full bond for the other project that they have nothing to do with, as long as they have sufficient erosion controls for the activities they're doing. And that might mean, some controls on the adjacent property, because there's, I'm not entirely sure the extent of like repavement, drainage improvements, all of that needs to be clear. And I would want to see both phases, so that way I have a comprehensive understanding of what's going on. So basically a phase 1 and 2, and it might be that there's some overlap of the erosion controls needed for both, or, adjustment if they're not both going on at the same time. So is the commission okay with me reviewing that administratively and allowing for a break in the two? Or do you want to see more information and make that decision yourself?
This is Commissioner Begemon. If we had known that it was going to be phased, we would have had plans for like a pre-construction meeting with the phases, et cetera. And so would it make sense to develop some sort of narrative like that you and the contractor would know about? I still think it could be done administratively without coming to us, but just to have a plan so that all parties are aware of it.
Yeah, I think that as part of the review process, we could make it clear that any inspection or prior to start of site work, and it might be, I'd have to double check the permit conditions. There might be, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but just to make sure, everything could be split in half, or there might be something that needs to happen before either of them start. But yeah, I think it would make sense to clarify that we would need to have the inspections and all of that phased as well.
This is Commissioner Goklowski. The cinema building is not really close to the wetlands. The biggest concern was all the construction on the lower portion of the property, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah, over by the theater building, the biggest change, I believe, is repaving, and there might have been some modification over by the pump station, and there's some planting.
Did they have to make an access for the fire truck or something to get in there?
For the pump station access, they were going to modify some stuff. And then I don't know entirely. I'm assuming that is this drainage improvement part of what would be under the Regal Cinema portion of this project?
Yeah, this is John Schmitz with BL. That's correct. Some of that drainage work. There's an existing driveway around that. I guess that's the west side of the cinema building. So we would be repaving, kind of reconstructing that road more or less to the same grades. Also be installing a new fencing and some landscaping between the cinema and the existing abutters there. There's not a lot of earthwork involved with this phase of the work because obviously the building's already there. So it's mostly paving, some concrete work for sidewalks, some landscaping, but not a lot of moving of earth.
Jamie, I'm comfortable to the extent that you find that as a result of that meeting or the narrative or whatever, that the plan is substantially the same as what we previously approved. I'm okay with agent approval.
Commissioner Goklowski, I agree.
Okay. Anyone feel differently?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schmitz.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Bye. By the way, just out of curiosity, how long for phase one do you think?
The architect is currently working on their plans. We're taking a look at ours now. We're getting the ball rolling. I believe by summertime they're looking at starting. I know that the developers are also talking with the utility companies. We need to make some relocations of the water line as well as the electric lines. So I think by June potentially we could be underway out there.
Hopefully the weather cooperates.
Right. Right. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're at the end of the road here for today, unless anybody has anything that they'd like to raise for the commission.
I'll just mention real quick, I threw the Amtrak 2025 Vegetation Control Program. It's just a document outlining the routine maintenance they do along the tracks in the Dropbox as correspondence as an FYI. We don't ever comment on it. It's something we received, so figured I'd share.
Thank you for sharing.
And if you have any questions or comments, I can try and get answers, but
again, thank you for helping us get through the deliberations in a much more expedited manner. If we didn't have that draft resolution, I think we'd be spending more time than we did. So thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for attending and
Thank you, Jamie.
participating.
I guess it's time to adjourn. Good night, everyone.
Have a
Good
good
night,
night,
all.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.